Well, everybody, I'm super excited because today my guest brings years of experience, even though she doesn't look it, years of experience of retail floristry to the Flower Podcast. Welcome, Abby.
Thank you. Yeah, more years than it looks. I've been in the game now for this will be my 18th year as a
Really?
florist. Yeah. And I know what you're
Well,
thinking. I look like barely 21.
indeed, indeed. So, obviously, floristry has suited you well. And so, we always love to start at the beginning. How did you find your way into flowers?
I stumbled into it. I fell into it. I was, a sophomore in college and was partying too much, and my parents sort of gave me a timeout. And so I came home for a little bit because I just didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so they said, well, you're going to get a job. And when I was younger, my grandfather, as his like retirement job, was a floral delivery driver.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I just sort of like I knew the local flower shop and I called them up and because I thought that looked like an easy, fun job, just driving around flowers. And they said, we're not hiring for that, but they had another location in the nearby city, still very small, but we call it the city. And they said, we're hiring for a designer and we train you. And so I got the job. And I wasn't awful at it, I that's as much as I can say. I
Uh,
didn't hate it. And when you're not awful at something, and I loved the women that I worked with, like, we were four women of different generations, and we just really became fast friends, and we were like our little family. And so I feel like just that introduction to it where I wasn't awful, I didn't hate it, and I love the people that I worked with, it was enough for me to keep doing the job for a long time while I was like trying to figure out school and go back to I tried seven different majors. And I was just like, I don't love this. I don't love this. And so it wasn't, yeah, until I had been doing flowers essentially at small flower shop for 7 years before I was like, oh my gosh, have I been doing the thing that I should be doing? So yeah, that was pretty much the way that it started. Not like a passionate love affair with flowers. I was like, they're fine, but I didn't really fall in love with flowers until like after I bought my own flower shop, if I'm being totally honest.
so how long was that for between, like, I don't know.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I got my first job at a flower shop at 19 and bought the flower shop that I own today in 2012. And I'm gonna call her out here, but my best friend, Abby Chapple, she's actually Holly Chappell's
Hmm.
daughter. She went to school, which at the university where I have a flower shop, and coming from that background with her mom, she needed a part-time job and she started working for me and we fell in love immediately, but I had never worked with someone who was in love with flowers. Like everyone I had ever worked with, everyone that had ever worked for me came into it as like a blue collar part-time job. Abby was the first person, and she said to me, I'll never forget, she was all of like 21, 22 at the time, maybe even not even that old. And she was like, I'm sure you're familiar with Francois Weeks. And I wasn't. I didn't know,
So she was
like
name
her
dropping.
upbringing in the flower world. Well, maybe. But she said, I'm sure you're familiar with her. And I pretended like I was. I was like, oh, yeah, of course, Francois. Yeah. Um, and she explained to me about, and even with her own mom being Holly Chapel, she didn't fall in love with flowers until she spent time with Francoise. And there was something that was awakened in her that she did for me, where I began to see the way that the flowers danced in arrangements. She introduced me into this world that I just is like I had these blinders on the whole time, where like I liked design. I loved the aspect of working with the community, but like something happened for me kind of late in the game where I was like, ooh, flowers are magnificent. I didn't know. Like it was kind of crazy.
So in other words, okay, so doesn't Abby work, the other Abby, Abby Chapel, doesn't she work at Potomac, or is that where she is now?
She does, yeah. She's in your line of work now. She's in the wholesale sector.
Yeehaw.
She is their brand manager, pretty much. Like she does their social media and that kind of thing. So
Well, she does a great job for their social media, I have to say.
she's a taste maker. She knows what looks good. She's my personal style consultant. She's my everything.
I love that.
Don't tell my husband I said that.
Well, the thing I found most fascinating is, a lot of times people just have their JOBs, and that's what it kind of sounds like this was for you.
Yeah.
And so, where did the switch happen? Was it just seeing it through the eyes of somebody else, having this experience with someone? I mean,
It was, I mean, it was sort of this evolution of I I had never really worked with local flowers before I bought my flower shop. I'd never touched a dahlia. I'd I think I'd maybe seen a ranunculus. This is crazy, but like we're talking 2005, 2006, 2007. Ranunculus were not something that most flower shops were working with, like
you're right.
so it was kind of this time where social media was starting to turn. We had Instagram. And so my eyes were being opened up to more and more flower varieties. And there was just more inspiration coming from all different avenues. And I did become a chapel designer. Of course, Holly was like, ooh, Abby's working for a florist. Let me, meet this florist. And so she definitely she invited me in. And then, my first experience, I got to go to New York for a conference and I met Susan McCleary
Yeah.
there.
That was the OG,
And
I think.
yeah, and Aisha Foss. Like my mind was blown. These people, Victoria Clausen, I got to freelance with her. It's just like all of these things started happening where my tiny world view, um, it was just completely blown open. I will say I had my big time flower crush. Even when I wasn't like in love with flowers, I would tear through the Flowers and magazines, the monthly issues, because Hitomi had a like monthly like how to, and I would clip them out of the magazines at the shop that I worked at. And so there was this like tiny spark in me where I wanted to do something different. And so I am a teleflora florist, and I wrote a little like a letter to win a scholarship, and I won a scholarship in 2013. So this is before Abby worked for me, and you could choose any class that you wanted to go to, and Ms. Gilliam was an instructor, so I chose to go to her class out in Oklahoma, and it was like, okay, I am buying 20 bunches of Middlino in every color. And I told my employees, I'm like, not one design goes out of here without a Middlino armature. Like I made so many ugly things in those early days of owning my own shop because I had been in this like tiny little hometown flower shop that was so cookie cutter. Everything was cut and paste. And then I had no chains, no mentor anymore. I was my own boss, and I made some really ugly stuff during those first years of owning my own shop. I'm grateful that I had those 7 years of like bench training the classics, like I made my carnation and daisy pyramid, in my basket over and over and
I
over again.
love
I
it.
did a ton of funeral work. So I'm so grateful for that time because it's those principles that I learned that as I try to be more artistic in my designs, like I have to go back to that early training where those foundations were set because it's like muscle memory, So that was a tangent, but here we are.
Well, Abby, I'm really excited to hear about that because I'm a big fan of Hitomi's also. And
She's a goddess.
I mean, I have never seen someone take nothing and make magic out of it. She's just amazing. And so
It's
I'm
otherworldly.
yes, indeed. I think she's been on the podcast 2 or 3 times. I mean, it's and been worth every minute of it. So, and I'm really excited to hear the fact that you mentioned that you are part of Teleflora,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like we have this huge can of possible questions to talk about. But one thing I think is sort of dear to my heart that I want to kind of talk about is a lot of times when I visit, and I'm going to just say traditional shops that do the
Yep.
funeral work, do the wire service thing, do that. I feel like a lot of times they have a really hard time staying current, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like trends change or things change, and I just can't ever tell, is that because of the wire service, is that because of just training, is that I'm because I really don't want to see flower shops continue to go on the decrease because they are so crucial to our industry.
Like this is my battle cry. This is the whole, if I had one thing that I cared about most, it would be helping flower shops like the one that I grew up in
Yeah.
make it and like move forward because when I bought my flower shop, we actually had two wire services and I was like, I think we only need one. And I kept Teleflora for so many reasons. And I'm still a Teleflora shop for so many reasons. And I'm going to tell you, I make a lot of money and a lot of profit. And I'm a Teleflora shop. Um, but I feel like there are some things that you have to get out of your traditional mindset of these are the only photos that I'm going to have on my website.
Mm.
Their recommended prices are the prices that I put. I need the orders, so I'm going to take the wire ends. Like there's no strategy behind that. And I think you'll also find most of those flower shops a lot of times complain about wire services.
Yeah.
They they feel like they are prisoners, you know? Like, I'm not making any money. This doesn't work. It's like you have total control over the whole thing? So a little bit of it is empowering them to customize it for what works for them. But I do think you have to diversify your menu offerings online, show different styles. Uh, I I know that I'm a big fan of Vonda Lefebvre
Yeah.
and Flower Clique. For instance, I pay them to merchandise my Teleflora website. I have a very like my Teleflora website. I have looked at every other provider out there, and every single one of them said, "Yeah, you're like your numbers, your visits, your clicks, all that back end SEO stuff that I don't know anything about, but I know is important. The traffic to it, they have been very clear with me that they cannot compete with the numbers that I get from Teleflora." However, if you went on my website, you would not immediately go, oh, that's a Teleflora website. Well, it doesn't look like it because I have Flower Clique who merchandises it. I use a lot of their images. I use a lot of my images. I use Teleflora as my technology provider. I don't really even accept a ton of wire ends. Like that's not really part of my business model. So, you know, I am the last person who would ever tell someone who has a wire service to get rid of it because I know the value that they provide. But you do have to look at your area, look at your market, and see what's working and what's not. And if wire service images or prices or styles
Mhm.
are not really keeping up with the trends, and the offerings that, your market that you're in is looking for, then you've got a disconnect and a problem, you know?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yes. And see,
okay.
this is where I'm not that familiar with it because I felt like, and I know a lot of people who maybe aren't that savvy when it comes to technology,
Mm-hmm.
which I would not put myself into the savvy category at all. But I know that, you might be in an area that has lots of local farmers. You may be in an area and those images from the wire service don't reflect the
That's
demand for
it.
flowers and the taste for flowers. And I can see where that is huge. Plus that if you accept a lot, which I mean I would imagine you have to accept a certain number of wire ends, but at the same time, if you're not stocking those flowers, then you have that challenge to deal with and navigate. And I mean, I know it's a whole thing, and yet some people that are in maybe less busy areas, more
Mm-hmm.
less busy areas or more rural areas, wire service might be their lifeline.
Right.
Um, because the
But
people,
if
yeah.
the numbers are pretty clear, and I hope I don't botch this, but Vonda is the one who originally shared this with me. If your income, your gross income, whatever, how you're getting your orders, if more than 20% is wire ends, it is actually impossible for you to be profitable. So what's a sad fact is that if you're taking wire ends because those are the only orders that you're getting, you're not really solving the problem. You're kind of just getting further entrenched into the problem, to be honest. It's my wire ends, I would say, are 1% of out. Yeah, like I said, I don't take them. Like,
So how does that work with Teleflora? Like
oh,
why?
they don't care. I pay to play. No, so they do my credit card processing. They have my point of sale system. I have a membership fee. I mean, they take care of all of that. So, I'll be I think I told you this before. I'm a little bit crude and I don't hold anything back. So I'll tell you, I pay about $1,000 a month for everything. So that's my website, my point of sale, my credit card processing, all of the other features that I get an SAF membership with that. Like there's a lot of perks that are included in that. And
Hmm.
again, they keep me at the top of Google and it's one-stop shopping.
Yeah,
I've
so there's
done the
value.
facts and figures. Yes, yes. I mean, like, is that expensive? Is $1,000 a month expensive? Yes, it is. But for the volume that I'm doing, it makes sense. Would I absolutely say, oh, everybody who's opening up a flower shop tomorrow should run out and get themselves the Cadillac of point of sale systems that I have? No, I'm not saying that either, right? Like, I think there's value in scaling. And had I just opened a flower shop versus purchasing an existing flower shop that had a large clientele, you know what I mean, already sort of built into it, I might be looking at other options. But I don't think you throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think you say, well, like this system just isn't working anymore, because clearly it's working for some people. And I know a lot of shops actually that feel the same way that I do. They're like, oh no, I make plenty of money with my wire service. And it's just because they've sort of figured out the combination that's right for them in their market.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that percentage of 20% or around that number.
Yeah.
I know it may vary for your location and your area and your profitability, but I think that makes a lot of sense to me. That
Mm-hmm.
anything in that range, because I know a lot of shops who over the years are way more than 20%. And I feel like that's where it makes perfect sense. It's where you start to get into trouble
Yep.
because of the margins and the paybacks and the percentages and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that makes sense. And then to have that SEO, I mean, you couldn't afford to pay for that. So honestly, even though $1,000 may sound like a lot to somebody, to be in the top 5 or 10 picks or number one pick, I mean, whatever, especially because a lot of times when people are sitting there wanting to send flowers, like if I'm trying to send flowers to a relative in another town, what do? You Google that town and florist, and then boom, there you are. So,
Right.
yeah, that's really makes sense. I feel like too, though, one of the things I think, and I know I feel like you've cracked this nut, so to speak, the um, the idea of how to figure out as a flower shop how to decide what are you going to offer, because if again, and I don't want to beat this dead horse, the wire service thing, but if you're going by what they dictate versus what is popular, what is maybe your style, what you resonate with, whether it's wedding, I mean, all that. So if I'm a flower shop and I'm trying to figure that out, like what's a good way to approach that? How do I how do we figure out that formula that works for us? And I will say one more thing before you answer, give you a
Yeah.
second to think. I feel like one of the things that came out of the pandemic, which I really liked, is that those offerings got pared down. Instead of offering 200 things, now we're maybe offering 20 things or maybe even 10. I mean, I don't know. So take it away.
That's it. Like a curated menu, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that is that is what I wanted. I again, people were buying my stock imagery all day every day. It's not like it wasn't working in my town. But here I am, one of the lowly retailers in Chapel Designers at the time. There was only a handful of us. And I'm seeing what my peers are doing. And
Exactly.
I'm like, man, my stuff doesn't look like that. And I was feeling bad about myself. Like, I really was. I was like, I want to be doing the pretty stuff. I want to be, selling the romantic stuff. But I'm like, but I can't show it. Like, it's not on my website. So how do I? So because there really is only so much that you can do, and you have to do it with every conversation that you have. You use descriptive language. You say, oh, for the same amount of money, I could really lengthen these stems a little bit and give it some dance, or, you call it organic or gardeny. Like you feel people out on the phone in the beginning when you don't have the imagery to represent, what you're showing. Again, this isn't really a problem now because we have Instagram, because we have social media, and everybody has a super nice camera in their back pocket, right? You
Right.
can just make the stuff and then put it out to the world. You don't even have to do the full photo shoot and get it onto your website anymore right away, just to start changing what your customers start seeing from you. But I think that what really took me, and I had project with Holly and Abby with Wellspring, where we created sort of a
Right.
recipe catalog. That was um, part of my own discovery, but then it was also writing recipes and doing photo shoots for my own website, where I started to get some just sort of like my customers were my beta testers. Like I have one, my first or second uh, couple of shoots scrapped every single photo of those. They are never coming to see the light of day again. Okay. And I only did it at like Valentine's Day when I wanted to make my own specials because of the deals that my wholesalers were offering. And half my images were flower or teleflora images. And you know, but so I think like that's where a lot of people start testing the waters is at a holiday. They're like, oh, I'm going to create some specials myself. And so once you do that, you use that information, what were the popular sellers, and you start just like taking stock, asking questions, looking at what sold, what didn't sold, noticing the patterns and the trends, and you write it down. And over time, everything takes time, transition takes time. You just notice like, hey, my customers like all the time are buying this yellow one I named Citrine, and they're buying it for a baby arrangement and a get well and a wow, this one's really ubiquitous for so many occasions. And it's, so it's like, okay, is it the shape that they like about it? Is it the flower selection? Is it the price point? Like you really have to like evaluate what your offerings are. I've gotten it down to a fine science because I am so obsessed and analytical with like looking at. It's not like I just like throw up the offerings on the website and I'm like, don't know why that one didn't sell. Like I'm going to look into it. I'm going to really look at what works and what doesn't. And what's funny is that over the years, so like I wanted to get away from roundy moundy. So like for my first several couple of years that I was making my own and putting them on my designs, I was getting wilder and crazier and more sparse. And those were just not selling as well as the roundy mounty. The general public wants a little bit of art, but they still want their money's worth. So those images have to look full. It is like honestly only in major markets that you can get away with like the ikebana,
Right.
gardening. Is this kind of dead on this side? I'm not sure, like moody looking stuff. I mean, because I tried it all. Those are the type of designers and their work that I am drawn to. It's very ethereal. It's more like pieces of art that's done for the camera. Retail is retail, you gotta rein it in a little bit. But I think for the most part, you just have to start somewhere. Just what are the color combinations that you like? And I will just say, I'm going to call out this arrangement because I've already said it so many times. The beautiful and blue arrangement from Teleflora. Everybody knows it. It's the blue vase, the white lilies, it's round. I think every wire service has their version of this design. And it's one of the top sellers. We always hate making it because I hate lilies. I don't like getting lilies in. So I was like, oh, what is it that people like? So you just start asking them. If there's a particular arrangement that's on your website that you hate, that everybody keeps buying, just ask people when they buy it, what do you like about it? And you'll get your answer pretty quickly. Well, I like that it wasn't red and pink. It wasn't feminine. It was whites and blues. Usually it's just about the color. So the more that you talk to your customers and the more you ask them questions when they're ordering what you have today, you're going to get that really helpful insight as to what you should be making. And okay, so I want to make this awkward shape. What are the things that I need to keep? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. What are the fundamentals of what's popular here? And then push it forward.
No, that makes sense because I know when you're talking about these roundy moundies, people feel like they're full of flowers. And then I also think a lot of times people see these romantic, really, beautiful designs where, you have, like you said, the dancing flowers around. But a lot of times they're in containers that don't hold very much water. And so it's really more designed for an event or event work. and
Yes.
and then they don't realize this disconnect. Well, this is great, but you need to make sure you water this all the time. You need to make sure that it cannot go dry, and that, because I know when I've done designs like that, oh, they're beautiful, but then 2 days later they're crispy because, oh, I forgot to put water in, or the cat drank all the
Well,
water or something. So
exactly. And the other key part about that, the biggest difference with retail is, not only do we have zero control once it leaves our shop, it's like when we're doing an event, we set it up, it's perfect, we walk away, right?
right.
We are sending something out and we do not know how these flowers are going to arrive and how they're going to be taken care of. And they're expected to last at least a week. So your mechanics, your vessel choice, all of that is, I'm not going to say it's so much more important, but it's a totally different animal. And the considerations that you have when doing something that's leaving your shop out of your hands to be delivered, you can't make things the same way. You just can't.
Yeah, and that water source or the water reservoir of your container to me is a big deal. Also,
Yes.
using flower food and things like that to me is another big deal, because these are all things that add days to your customers. Flowers, which that's what they remind me of. The other thing I was thinking about as you were talking earlier is, by not relying on the wire service for your wire in for those wire in orders, and of course you bought your shop, which had some customers already, obviously, but you have that opportunity to build community. If everything's
Yeah.
on the internet, if everything is web shop driven, you kind of lose that connection.
Right.
And I was thinking as you were talking, like, how did you find out? And of course you said you just asked them, what is it about this that you liked? And you're going to get answers pretty quickly. And I feel like that feedback, a lot of times we're afraid to ask that question, but I don't think we should be, because if they're already ordering that vase, there's obviously something about that design, that vessel, the flower, whatever, that they liked. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
1,000%. And the flip side of that, of asking that question, I just got back from North Carolina. I did a presentation down there, and it was all about, modern floristry, retail floristry. And it really is about, like, some of the things that are not optional anymore. If people are buying flowers, if they are coming into your store, if they're picking up the phone and calling you instead of just clicking, it is about the experience and what
Mm,
will not only keep them buying from you, but purchasing flowers more is about the experience that you create for them. And so it starts with the questions that you ask, the conversation. I'm not saying you take 20 minutes with every person, because we just don't have that time.
right.
That's time is a luxury. Retail florists don't have it. But just to connect with them and ask them questions like, not who's this going to? Oh, how do you know her? I mean, like, it's odd, right? To be like, to use someone's name in conversation. You're like, oh, thanks so much, Karen. I really appreciate it. But I gotta tell you, it's those little things that personalize the experience for them, where you go from an order taker to you are the expert, you are the designer. They are feeling like, oh my gosh, this person is really taking the time, even if though it's still a 5-minute phone conversation. You're asking them questions. Oh, I love that arrangement. That's one of our most popular. What did you like about it? I love and I share with them sometimes. That's how especially if I have to make a substitution.
Oh
This
yeah.
is my little trick, is that, like, if I don't have something that they're looking at, I say I love something about the one component of the arrangement I'm able to keep the same that day. You know, if it's got free spirits in it and the rest of the thing, I can't really pull together, but I've got the free spirits. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is one of our most popular arrangements. Like the free spirits in it, those roses, they blow open. They're huge, but they last forever. I've actually got some really cool local things in that go with it really well. By the time they've heard this, they've forgotten about the arrangement that they saw online, right? Like now they're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting something special. I'm getting something that nobody else knows about. Like, and they feel like they enjoy the experience of shopping with you and talking with you, that maybe today they got flowers for someone who was sick or it was their birthday. And tomorrow they know somebody who's like having a crappy day. Did I say crappy on the Flower Podcast? The classiest podcast in
That's hilarious.
but it's like, oh, I really liked that whole experience. They call you instead of just like sending them a note or doing, even if it's a $25 arrangement. And yes, I will still do, it's a small arrangement, but you know, they buy flowers from you more because they just enjoyed the care that you took and how much interest you showed in them. That is like, I think the most important part of owning a flower shop today. Like your designs can actually be relatively mediocre. And I will tell you this as somebody who made some real bad knockoff Hitomi Gilliam arrangements back in 2014, that your designs can be pretty mediocre and you can still be named the best florist in your area because you had the skills to really connect with your community.
I love that. I'm so glad you said that because I feel like, a lot of times when you look back at historical small businesses and their local community, that it's that relationship. It's that relationship with the baker or the banker or the person, the hair salon or whoever these, there was personal connections. And that, I mean, I know that when I go to the town where my in-laws are, they go into this restaurant and the wait staff know them and ask how they're doing. I mean, it's like there's all of these touch, this touch as this community connection. And I feel like sometimes with the flower shops, we don't do that. And I don't know why, because you know, I'm gonna throw this out there and muddy the water maybe a little bit. I know that in the past we have had conversations with groups of people here through the podcast on different channels, and some of the stressors that impact the traditional flower shop, the brick and mortar stores, are people that maybe work out of their home or work out of a studio and only do weddings and events, and you know that they sort of infringe on each other's territory a little bit. But then also, I mean, with the back when I started, grocery stores didn't have the flowers or services they do now. Most of them have come off of the services, but they're still offering the flowers, right? And it's just like, it feels like there's this pressure for flower shops on all these levels, but yet I know from our conversation a couple days ago, you still feel like flower shops can make money. And
Oh, yeah.
so, yeah. And so I'm kind of like, how do you work through that big mess I just threw on your lap? What do you say to that? Because I'm sure, especially like in North Carolina when you're doing your talk, I'm sure you must hear some of this.
Absolutely. And the response from every attendee, either after the presentation, and I stuck around and I chatted with, a lot of the people that came, and it was incredible just to chat with them about what their kind of setup is like. but then also the direct messages that came afterwards from them. Um, Everyone really connected with that part of it. And we talked a little bit about the pandemic, is that florists, retail florists specifically, had a little bit of a renaissance during that.
Yes.
Because everyone was searching, and we still are in our digital, e-world, we are searching for real connection. And flowers, like the fact that people use flowers as a way to express their emotions, like, are you kidding me? I'm surprised the grocery stores can touch us. Like, I don't see that as a problem. Like, people who want to work out of their home and just do events only, like, that is great. I can tell you that is not for me. This job would not be worth it if I did not have the connection with the customers that I'm able to have. So I really lean into, first of all, I am not the cheapest florist around. In fact, I'm likely known as the most expensive in my area. I don't have a minimum for weddings. I don't even have a minimum for deliveries. And so it's like, I don't, I just feel like a lot of it is old mindsets that we have to slough off. That you can't, it's like, I would never spend $200 on an arrangement because I get to be around flowers, right? But I can't say what those flowers are worth to someone else, you know? And I
And
just
people
think
do it all the
that
time.
they do it all the time. And I'm shocked by it. I'm like, can you believe this guy just spent $250 on flowers? Like, I'm glad he did, but people are they do it all the time. And I'm just really, the more that I lean into uh more of the emotional side of doing what I do, the stressors that I feel like most people complain about, I don't feel them. I feel immense gratitude every single day. And I'm a person who has struggled with depression. I take medicine for anxiety. I'm not like a Susie Sunshine over here, okay? I mean, like, I kind of am, but I'm not a person who just like doesn't have problems. And but I can tell you that my flower shop really has never been one of them. And working with public and worrying about, I've never worried about, I had a flower shop until we moved. I was across the street from the grocery store. Okay, like, all of that's in my backyard. I have tons of event only florists who are getting wedding bookings more than me. Like, the competition, all of that, it doesn't faze me, it doesn't bother me, because I know what I provide to my customers is a rare thing that the grocery store and the event wedding florists can't touch, because I'm helping get something to their mom when she's stuck at the nursing home and can't have visitors for 2 years.
That's
When you've
huge.
lost your husband or your child, I will sit there on the couch with you and tell you, I am so sorry that this is the reason we're meeting. And I'll mean it, and I might cry, and that's okay. All of that stuff that goes into retail floristry keeps me grateful as every day.
Yeah. I hope this is connecting for people, because I feel like even what you're saying as it relates to retail floristry relates to our entire industry, whether you're growing flowers, whether you are just doing weddings and events, but especially in a retail setting, that is a game changer, because you're right. if you're going to the local big box store to buy flowers, they're sitting out a box of bouquets. There's no personal contact. But
No.
and I've made this analogy so many times. To me, it's also the difference in me going and spending money. I might save some money and buy a special steak to bring home and cook, but I will promise you it will not be as good as if I just went to the restaurant and had somebody who knows what they're doing,
Right.
put that together. And in the end, I'm probably going to enjoy that meal someone else did way more, because I'm going to be mad as I chew my leather that the stuff I
Yeah.
cooked the entire time. But I'm like, but this is the way flowers are too.
Yeah.
And I think because we don't, and I'm glad you mentioned mindset. And I think because that mindset, we're constantly battling that, because if we're not, it, just because you wouldn't spend that money on the flowers doesn't mean, and I appreciate the other thing you said, it doesn't mean that they don't have the emotional connection and desire to express their feelings to somebody else through flowers, you know, for $5. They don't, they want to spend the $250 because that's the feelings, the emotions that they have that's going with that. So,
Yeah.
um,
I'm gonna veer off topic just for a quick second
sure.
because I am one of my practices in life is if I've said something wrong, I call myself out on it. And I just want to be very clear about this because when I was down in North Carolina, I actually, Mayesh sponsored the flowers and I missed a couple of things. Like I set up the order and then I was like, man, I wish I had this. And I ran into a Harris Teeter and
Mm-hmm.
I met the florist there and he's actually a kind of a big deal. We started following each other on Instagram, and that's where he is now. And so I do know when I say grocery stores, I am kind of specifically speaking about my area because all we have are the prepackaged bouquets that are just set out. There's no person who works there and does arrangements. But I do want to just say that I know that there are many florists who work at grocery stores and do have that personal connection. And so that is not who I'm speaking with when I'm like, oh, they can't get it at the, but you know what I
Thank you
mean.
for
Like,
saying that. No, I appreciate you saying that because over the years, I know that there are many grocery stores where they have their customers and clientels and they do the corsages and they do. Yes, you're
yes,
absolutely right. Thank you for saying that because I, I am more talking about the big box stores that are all hands off, that are
yes,
all, we're
exactly.
just
And that's
putting
all
buckets
we
of
have
flowers
where
out.
I'm at.
Yeah.
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 No, no, I appreciate you saying that and clarifying that because yeah, it's so funny because I know a lot of people who got their start in that kind of a grocery store where they did design work and they had that opportunity. And I don't know that I've ever shared this before, but when I first came back to Atlanta to work in wholesale, my my account was Kroger.
Oh,
And
really?
oh yeah, and it was a big deal, okay? And I was, I repped, I don't know how, dozens and dozens of stores all over North Georgia. So, and what was the most bizarre thing, and now I'm going on a rabbit trail now, but the most bizarre thing is you can have three stores on the same road and be 4 or 5 miles apart, and each store is night and day different. And one store would do custom florist, retail florist type arrangement designs and couldn't keep them. And another store, they'd throw them all away. So I mean, it's a
Weird.
whole gamut. So anyway, maybe that's a topic for another podcast episode. But anyway, um, what I wondered, especially after some of the things we've talked about, if you were to look back and how you run your business, was there ever like one or two things that you felt like made the difference in you becoming more profitable?
Vonda Fever.
Okay.
I mean,
So
no, okay. Here's what
I
I'll
don't
say.
want to be
Two
an
things.
infomercial for Vonda
I know,
Lefevre.
I know. Well,
So
you asked, and
I
she
know.
is my profitability coach. No,
Okay.
uh, a couple of things. I am naturally cheap.
Okay.
Um, I am frugal. I love a good deal. I from the shop that I grew up at. That's what I say is that I grew up there. Um, the owner came from shoes. He opened Nordstrom shoes in different parts of the country. That was his job. And he basically taught me sales is sales, profit is profit, and gave me, a business school training, under him. And so I was really like steadfast in my markups and all of that. Like I never was like, well, it needs a little bit more. Like I was trained where you write down every ingredient that goes in, and one rose in this arrangement, if you extrapolate that,
Right.
after all of your arrangements a few months, like, well, there's your mortgage, to a new house, right? So I think that I've always really been very adamant about having all of my designers price everything out. We use, industry standard as much as there is one, markups on things. But I didn't even know what a cog was until Flower Clique gave me like a spreadsheet, which is cost of goods sold for anybody listening who's like, what's a cog? I didn't know what that was. And I had never tracked my expenditures of fresh sales. Like I had a method that I thought of like, oh, okay, this is how much business I think I'll do this week. So I'll probably need this amount of flowers. And then I cautiously buy. So I would end up getting flowers in almost every day because I wasn't sure, like, so it wasn't until I started studying my numbers of my fresh flower purchases and sort of, making sure that they were staying within certain percentages in relation to my sales that I really was able to fine tune my buying habits and look at, whoa, I got a little out of control. I mean, you can see when you're throwing more away. Um, I'm meticulous about saving things and reprocessing flowers. Like I have like the leanest flower shop. We really have very little waste. All the teachers come in all the time asking us for scraps, and I'm like, we don't have those. um, so I think that like the change and the shift when I really started paying attention to making sure that like my fresh purchases and all of that kind of stuff. And I also work with my bookkeeper. Like there's not a day, even though I pay somebody to do that stuff, after a couple of years in business where I was getting more of a system, she started teaching me more about what she did. Um, I think the biggest problem for most florists is that they're not, either they don't have the time or the skill to properly keep bookkeeping records and get all of their taxes right and all of that and really be paying attention to their purchases. Or they're too embarrassed to let other people look at it. And so they don't ask for help. But you really like, you have to know what's going on with your numbers. You can't just say, like, this is the money that I have in the bank. So that's the money that I have. Because you got checks out there. And the florists that I coach and that I talk to, I disturbingly see that as a problem more than it should be.
The thing I appreciate about you saying that is that a lot of times, I mean, and I'm probably guilty of this too to some extent. When you see the waste, or you see, whatever goes in the garbage, and you have a tendency to estimate the value of that probably less than it really is. And a lot of times you think, oh, well, that's $20 or that's $50 or that's 100 or whatever it is. But what you forget is over 52 weeks, those numbers add up, and you roll a holiday in there, then that can be interesting. But I feel like if you know that percentage of your cost of goods and you know where your waste is, and I feel like in some point you realize these are real dollars, and they are dollars I work really hard for that are just going in the dumpster. And that's the part where you kind of wake up a little bit, I think. And it's not until you do that hard look that you really make that connection.
Right.
So I'm curious. I know, like and I don't remember what the numbers were, but I know that a long time ago there'd be like restaurants or pet stores and different things. I've known people in, and they know kind of that target sweet spot for them as far as industry standards go. Like if I'm a restaurant, I need my food cost to be here, my labor to be here, whatever. Where
Yep.
do you feel like is a good sweet spot for that number? Maybe not specifically for you, but just kind of generally, like where do you need to be?
25% is what I sort of look at. And so there's at least for because like I said, I use a spreadsheet that was created and it's so easy for me to plug things in. So basically there's like a way to plug in like your total sales and then your fresh sales and then your fresh purchases. And, there's a little bit of room because depending on how you purchase, so like I look at it monthly now because I get all of my greens, most of them trucked up from Florida. So when I buy boxes of Pitt and Baker, that's not going to last 1 week. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Right.
buying that to last me several weeks. So there's things like that I do think that like it's a little bit tricky to just study week by week, that eventually you should try to look in like larger chunks. But 20 to 25% I think is about right for your fresh purchases.
Right.
So
Well, that number doesn't surprise me, and I think that's just good to know. But I feel like that's a number that I think if you have that as a standard, then you can at least know how to evaluate where you're at.
mhm.
And I think it's a good place to start. Um, we've talked about so many different things, and I know we're kind of running out of time. And one of the topics I thought was interesting that I felt was kind of this is going to be a big can of worms that hopefully we can wrap up here in a good amount of time, but is this idea of like when you're working with local farmers
Mhm.
and what they charge.
Mhm.
And a lot of times they because they maybe don't understand what the real value of that flower is, they undermine themselves. And I know we were talking
Yes.
about that the other day, and I'm like, I mean, what do you tell your local florist, I mean, or your local farmers? Or do you, or how do you handle that?
Join Abby and Scott for a 6-part series on pricing for the local market. Okay. This is seriously, it is a problem because there's a trickle down effect here, right? There's not a good relationship between the florists who are using the flowers and the farmers who are growing the flowers and how they're pricing them. So it started that I worked with my local growers, and then I sort of started spreading my message because of connections that I've made with local flower farms in my area. Um, they sell their flowers to me and to other floral shops and event florists, and some of them even do wedding flowers, right? Or event floristry,
Sure.
and they also sell them direct to the consumer, whether it be at little pop ups or at a farmer's market. So they are selling across a couple different platforms, and kind of, I feel like their pricing sometimes changes with the way the wind blows. They have very set pricing when it comes to selling to the florist. They say this dahlia is 250. But when they go to the farmers market and they see other people undercut them, and they go on social media and they say, does this wrap bouquet look like $25? And if somebody's like, no, it looks more like 15, they're going to take that, three ranunculus and a dahlia and, pretending that they grow in the same season here. Uh, and put them in that wrap bouquet and say, all right, I'm going to sell it for 15. And I know this because literally every local grower that I work with, who's now a very good friend of mine, has admitted this to me because they talk about it. Like, what else are they going to do with the flowers? They don't grow on a schedule. They're flush with dahlias sometimes of the year. They're flush with flowers in July when nobody's buying them. They have to do a fire sale, right? But they usually don't extend that fire sale to their wholesale customers. So the biggest thing that I see that would help this situation is it's sort of understanding that, florists are not asking you to sell them to us for less. We're asking you to consider the markups that we put on the flowers because, for instance, Harmony Harvest, very good friends of mine, and I had this conversation with them. I said, you're selling your dahlias to me for $250. And when somebody comes out to your farm or you sell them in a wrap bouquet, you're pricing that dahlia at $350, right? You're marking it up, which you think you've done your job. But I'm selling your dahlia for $8, $7.50. I can't even do the math of what 250 times 3.5 is, but we'll pretend it's somewhere around $7.50, $8. And so this creates this disconnect between the consumer, right, who's coming to my professional establishment wondering, why are Abby's dahlias $8 when I can get them over here for $3.50? So there's now competition and this huge disparity in the pricing that creates confusion in the market. But it also doesn't strengthen our relationship. It doesn't make me want to purchase from you more. And it also undervalues an American grown flower that should have a luxury view on it. And some people do. I mean, in the event world, I think brides know that dahlias are expensive, right? But American grown is fighting against, why do we as Americans think the rose is the most luxurious flower that you can buy, that we have an entire holiday around it? Well, I'll tell you what's not helping solve that problem is selling zinnias at the farmer's market for 25 cents, because you're basically telling the consumer that these are cheap garden grown flowers. They are not a luxury. Is that harsh? I don't mean to be harsh.
Well, I think,
want American grown flowers to succeed so badly.
yeah. Well, I do feel like what happens, because I've been in this situation when we used to grow flowers, where people are like, but you just grew that in your yard. Why is it so much? I mean, you didn't have to ship it on a plane or boat, or you didn't have to put it on a truck, and you didn't have to put boxes and cooler. I mean, you just went and cut it out of your yard, right? And I'm like, well, I can appreciate your point of view, but unfortunately, you don't realize the hours put into fertilizing and weeding and watering, and I work, I have a living wage, as opposed to the living wage in South America may be different, and it may be different in Holland, it may be different in Hawaii. I mean, it's all different depending on where you live, right? And I feel like people forget that. But I do agree wholeheartedly that I I do think that depending on who you're selling your flowers to, your pricing should reflect their point in the chain. If I know we've had conversations with flower farmers that they've talked about selling a bouquet for $35, and just the stress between partners on that situation, because one feels like it's too much and one feels like it's not enough, and it's kind of like, well, but are you selling out? Well, yeah, we are selling out. Well, then okay, then it's fine. Then that is what the market wants. And the thing about it is you do end up, I feel like, undervaluing your own flowers when you discount them. And maybe what you do is find a different way to add value. Maybe you put less ranunculus. We're just going to say everything grows at the same time. We,
Right.
put less ranunculus, peonies, and dahlias in the same bouquet. We all know that isn't the way that works. And maybe you add some fillers or some foliages that are similar colors that add,
This is
yeah,
it.
I mean, adds
It's
value.
honestly, it's an ingredient problem. And when I spoke out at Harmony Harvest, and I will tell you, I grew one zinnia because I don't grow anything because I have the brownest thumb ever. Um, I went to them and I was like, I would not sell this for less than the price of my firstborn child. Like what it took me to grow this one zinnia. So it's like once I started conversing with them and seeing the challenges that they had to pricing the way that I thought that they should be pricing, what it really comes down to, I think, for a lot of growers and what they're maybe not getting is that they have an ingredient selection problem, that they're only growing the caviar
Mm.
and they need to maybe diversify their crops a little bit. And it's like, okay, and I get it. If you're flush with, peonies at this time and they're only going to last, like, yes, make what you can off of them, but let people know this is a 75% savings, right? Like, let them know that that's a super sale. And if you grow some foliage, if you grow some fillers, and your bouquet is still as full and as colorful in a market wrap scenario, I guarantee you your most of your customers are not being like, hey, there aren't 17 ranunculus in this bouquet like that. You know what I mean? It's usually about the color and the fullness when it
Yes.
comes to price for the general public. Yes, you want a couple of those nice things, but I think there's just um sadly not as much like I can't believe I'm going to use this term, but like reaching across the aisle, right? I'd love to see more retail florists engaged with slow flowers and Deborah Prinzing. I'd love to see, like, you know what I mean? Like more people getting out of their little echo chamber and going and looking at other parts of the industry. Every time I have deeper conversations with my wholesaler, I understand their point of view more. I understand what challenges they face. Not only does it soften me towards them, makes it strengthens our relationship when you can understand someone's point of view and you're better at solving problems because you can anticipate someone else's needs. And the more that I started like being honest with my local growers of like, here's why I'm not buying your status. We had this great conversation. It was like, I'm not telling you not to grow status because it's one of your best dried products that you're going to sell later on and people will spend a lot of money on it, but I can get status for half the price from my wholesaler, and status is not valued in the retail,
Right.
design world in the same way. And once they understood what I wasn't buying status, and I understood what it took for them to grow status and how they can sell it direct to consumer, they had a better idea of how much they should actually be growing and who their customer was for that specific crop. And you don't get to that understanding of your business as a grower without talking to your buyers about how's my stuff performing? How's the stem length for you? I noticed you never buy my Tweedia. What is it about the Tweedia that does that like,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I could talk to you for 20 hours about this. We have just scratched the surface.
Yes. Well, but I love to. We're going to use the phrase. I love to plant the seed, and then maybe we will have further conversations on this topic because I do feel it's important, and I do feel that a lot of times that appreciation comes out of those conversations for these different levels in our supply chain. Back when I first started um, in in the floral world, the supply chain was a lot more defined, and there wasn't a lot of crossing over as far as what happens now, where you can buy your greenery from Florida and have it trucked up, or you can have a local person you get ranunculus from, or we didn't have a lot of those things, so you didn't have one level of the chain supplying multiple levels of the consumers, and now we have a lot of that. And I'm not saying it's bad or good, but I do think that it's important to understand where we are in the process, and that we're not pulling the rug out from under our own feet sometimes by what we do. Because if it were me and I had a lot of peonies, like we were talking about a minute ago, as a grower, I would probably say, I know you normally buy 100 stems of pink peonies at this price, and I can honor that. I have no problem with that. But we are flushing on that. Would you be interested in extra peonies if they were less expensive? And because you're the regular customer, give you that option. And then maybe you might average your price down, and maybe you would run a special, or you would, or just use them as you use pink peonies as a filler that week, which,
Right.
heaven forbid. But you know what I'm saying? It's like you have that opportunity to work with each other. And that's one
Yeah.
of the things I try to do with the local farmers we work with is, they tell me, hey, this is happening, this is coming, the tsunami of status is coming. And, at least I know, and I prepare, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to not buy as much of this status for a week or two so I can help you out. I mean, this is
Right.
where communication just makes all the difference. And I appreciate you letting us just scratch the surface. And because I'm sure we're going to hear some great feedback on this, and I feel like this is going to be a topic for a few more times this year. So that's great. Abby, always love to wrap up with that piece of advice question at the end. And so can't believe our time's already up, but I'm going to say, what piece of advice would you like to leave our listeners?
Um, my piece of advice is for retail flower shop owners. No, for bosses. You could have a wedding and event business, but if you have employees, it would be to get really comfortable admitting out loud when you are wrong and when you've made a mistake.
Okay, this is out of left
Just,
field, which I love.
I'm telling
So,
you though, if I had one piece of like, this
yeah.
has changed everything for me, and my employees are some of my best friends, and they have been for years. And a lot of people have a hard time in this industry keeping good help. And I swear to you, the change that it makes in the dynamic in the workplace, it invites people to do the same. They feel safer if they've made a mistake. It softens you to them. It is the best thing I have ever done because nobody likes to be wrong. And I feel like we all are having a tough time in today's day and age, not being right. Practice it daily. Even if nobody knew what you were thinking in your head, call it out. I just want everybody listening to do this. Just really make it a practice to call yourself out being wrong if you are in a leadership position, and see how quickly it makes a difference in your relationship with your staff and even the way you feel about yourself.
Wow. Well, that was another hour-long topic just on its own. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing
I wasn't
that.
prepared for that question, but that's like my most profound thing that I've learned in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that because I think you're right. It's gotten harder with employees for retention. There's a lot of opportunities out there. There's a lot of times there's so many different dynamics that our industry brings to the table, and I feel like what you just said could make a huge difference no matter what kind of business you're in. So thank you so much. Abby, thank you for being on the Flower Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a dream.